Welcome to this week's interview. I'm delighted to be here with Mark Matousek. Mark is a journalist. He's the author of several best-selling books, including When You're Falling Dive, The Boy He Left Behind, and his most recent book, which is Ethical Wisdom. I first came across Mark in Oprah magazine. I had this habit of just kind of reading certain writers and thinking, that's juicy stuff in there. There's some really good wisdom in there. And I used to tear out those articles and kind of refer to them, use quotes from them. And it's always wonderful when you get to meet the face behind the words. So I'm really delighted to welcome this week Mark Matousek.
Hi, Jackie. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's really lovely to have you.
Thank you.
So we've been doing these whole series of journal interviews, and we always start off from this place of asking people about what their earliest memories of writing. And I'm wondering, what was your earliest memory of writing?
Well, my earliest memory was when I was in elementary school. I grew up in a house where there was a lot of confusion and there was a lot of violence and abandonment. It was a hard family to grow up in. And writing is where I was able to make sense of my experience. And I started writing in a journal when I was maybe 7 years old.
Wow.
And I started writing kind of compulsively. And I found that it was the place where I could make myself feel better. I could make order out of chaos that was around me. And I've been writing ever since, and it's always been my refuge, my place that I could connect.
So that's remarkable. So at the age of 7, you were in this household where there was a lot obviously going on, but you had the wherewithal to find paper, to get down on paper how you were feeling. Can you remember the kind of things you would write about?
Absolutely. I mean, I would write about why, what happened here? Why are people so quiet? Why are people so, why is there so much shame in our house? Why is there so much pain? I was always trying to penetrate the darkness.
Yeah.
And there were two things I would do. I would write in my journal, and I would also sit in front of the mirror and talk to myself.
Wow.
Because it was the place. I'd lock myself in the bathroom for hours and talk to myself in the mirror and give myself, say, who are you? What are you doing here? What's wrong with these people? And it was the way that I would figure things out. I kind of became my own therapist at a very young age.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of writers who have quoted that paper has been their greatest therapist. So like there was one writer who quoted that actually the paper is open 24 hours. You don't have to book an appointment to go to your therapist. You don't have to book an appointment to go to your GP. So it's wonderful to hear you say this. And I'm really interested in what you were saying about the kinds of questions that you asked yourself. So you were asking yourself questions like the what questions, the why questions. You were really getting behind, because so often we go through life and we're not actually asking those questions.
Yeah.
I like to think of those questions as like inquiry questions.
Yes, they are absolutely. And for those of us who grew up in a lot of danger and a lot of trauma and a lot of serious confusion, there was no other way to survive than by asking yourself these kinds of questions. It wasn't that I necessarily even wanted to be doing that. It's that circumstances forced me to try to figure things out, because there was no authority where I grew up. There was no information, and I could feel that people around me were suffering, and there was a lot of stuff going on that no one talked about, and so it was my way of not going crazy.
Yes.
Really. And if I didn't do it, I did start to feel a little crazy. And to this day, if I don't write for a few days in a row, I can feel
Absolutely.
I can feel the film kind of bunching up in my mind.
My eyes get bigger and I look a bit like scary.
Right.
I need to do that writing, so I really get that. So I'm really interested in this, Mark. So I remember, well, for myself, my trauma really, one of the biggest traumas happened when I was 7. But I don't think I asked myself those kinds of questions. So I'm just thinking about, if you're working with children, for example, are those the kinds of questions you would put to a 7-year-old?
No.
Okay.
No.
So tell us more about that.
I was an unusual 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I was very precocious.
Yeah. Well, is there another word for precocious? Because what does that mean?
It means that I had a penetrating mind. I always asked a lot of deep questions.
Yeah.
And they didn't feel premature to me. They didn't feel, excessively serious to me. They felt natural to me.
Yes.
If I were working with a 7-year-old now, I would ask them how they felt.
Yeah.
I would ask them what they think is happening around them.
Yeah.
When do they feel sad?
Yeah.
Are there stories What's the story that's going on around them? Could they tell the story of their own life, their own childhood?
Yeah.
Tell us the story of your family. That kind of thing can be very, very revealing
Yeah.
for a kid. You don't have to go right for the jugular and say,
Yeah.
"Are you having an existential crisis?"
Yes. I don't think that would go down very well.
Right.
So that's really, really helpful. And of course, I'm just wondering about, there's so much been talked about in terms of the work with our own inner child, because often that inner child inside of us wasn't safe.
No.
So you talked about writing being a place of refuge for you.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how that relates to the work of the inner child that often we have to do when we become adults.
That's a great question. I mean, I didn't feel like I was a child even when I was a child. I felt like I was a grown-up inside a child's body, and that I was a witness to the experience and that I wasn't quite in it. It took me years. It took me 30 years after that to start working with the inner child. And when I started trying to do that, I realized my inner child was so repressed and so beaten up and so sad. It took me a long time to kind of coax him out of his hiding place. And then I realized how really brutalized I'd been as a child emotionally, and traumatized. And it took a while for that child to be able to speak in his language, because I was talking in a grown up tone of voice when I was a very little boy. I used to give people advice, adults advice when I was a little kid. I was just one of those strange children.
I'm not sure it's strange. Different.
It was different. Yeah, it was different, and I just felt like I was engaged at a level that was beyond my years, and that there wasn't room for innocence. There wasn't room for child, to be a child. And it took me a long time before I learned to be a child.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of innocence in my life.
Yeah. I'm a real fan of lists in my journals, and I think that one of the lists that is really helpful to do is a list around what we love doing, or the things that make us laugh, the things that we never probably got to do in terms of playing. I think that often, brings out my inner child. I remember I ran a retreat once in New York, and they got us, the women introduced me to this game, red light, green light, orange light. I had the most fun. It was just so fantastic. And we sometimes have to kind of give those things back to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have enforced playtime.
Yes, I like that.
Oh, I do too. I mean, I do. This is what I do now. I'm really conscious of having enough time in my life that is free and unstructured and not serious.
Yes.
Because so much of you know what it's like as a writer. So much of your life is spent in your mind, examining things, going to the depth of things, and sometimes you want to play. Sometimes you just want to be silly and just have a good time.
Yeah.
And it's important to let yourself do that.
I think so. Yeah. I think you're right. My sisters always say, we love it when you're the silly Jackee.
Yeah.
And not the serious Jackee.
But you can't. But the serious Jackee is what makes you, mostly what makes you unique.
Yeah.
It's the part of that's your wisdom voice. That's the piece of you that, has something to report from your experience. And the other piece is the playful voice, and that's fun.
They all come together, don't they?
They do come together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this really kind of takes us quite nicely, because I think one of the things why your work has really resonated very deeply with me, because I think you have a way of explaining really clearly why the work about working with your shadow and integrating your shadow is key to the healing process.
Absolutely.
And not about pushing it away. So I'd love you to tell us more about that and how that relates to journal writing.
Absolutely. I mean, journal writing for me is all about going to the forbidden places, going off the grid, going into the unknown. And unless you do that, you can't really gain self-knowledge. You can't know yourself, and you can't live from your wholeness, from your entirety, if you're trying to run from the shadow or put it aside.
Yeah.
So I'm always talking to people about going into the shadow, because that's where the juice is.
Yeah.
That's where the life is. That's where our fears and our struggles and our longings, our taboo desires, all of that stuff that makes us unique is there.
Yeah.
And once we go there and acquaint ourselves with it, we feel bigger as people. We feel deeper as people. and we're not so scared of the pieces of ourselves that may not be acceptable to the world. We spend so much of our life suppressing what
Yeah.
isn't acceptable. That creates shame in us. That to allow that breath, to allow that the light in on that changes everything.
Yeah.
Changes everything. We don't have to walk around feeling like half of us is hidden.
Yes.
I did. I mean, I walked for years around feeling like half of me was hidden in shadow.
Yeah.
Because I was scared to go there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of grief there. There was a lot of uncertainty there. There was all kinds of pain there. And like I was saying in the talk last night, we don't go to pain voluntarily. We generally have to be dragged there.
Yeah.
And so what happened for me is that I was dragged by my experience into that, and I wanted to express it.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to, even the word shadow is a bit derogatory.
Oh, I'm
it's
so
scary.
glad you said that.
It's scary to people. The word shadow can be really scary. It's not your shadow. It's the parts of yourself that you're not paying attention to. It's the parts of yourself that you're unconscious of, voluntarily or involuntarily. It's bringing out what's not known into the light to be expressed, to be examined, and to be appreciated. Because there's a lot to appreciate there.
Yeah.
There's a lot to appreciate there, and you know what it's like when you touch on something in your life that has been hidden, shameful, painful, and express it. It creates a bridge between you and other people. And that's what's beautiful about writing. That's what's beautiful about being able to write about experience that's difficult and threatening, is when people relate to it and say, "My God, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
That's my experience. That's what I've been feeling." To me, that's the greatest joy.
I think you're absolutely right, because the writers that I resonate with are always the writers that are willing to take off the mask. I always go for those writers because they give me permission to take off my mask.
Yes.
And I love how you describe the work of the shadow about paying attention, because so often that's what we're not doing. We're trying to, it's almost like, I mean, if I think about myself, my parents came to the UK in the 1960s from the Caribbean. It was about creating a better life for their children. I was the first one in my family to go to university, so you can imagine there was almost like, you have to prove that, well, this was a job well done. And
Absolutely.
we don't always fit into those steps. I mean, I was one of those, I was a young woman who, I came out of university, I went into youth and community work, working with young people. To my mum and dad's disappointment, I didn't go to work with a briefcase.
Right.
I wasn't suited and booted.
Right.
So I could feel a sense of disappointment. They couldn't say to their friends that their daughter was a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't kind of have a title that really fitted into things. So the mask, letting down the mask, and the shadow work is so important. And I think that your writing courses and your books and the way in which you also interweave other people's stories, I think you, particularly in When You're Falling Dive, every story that you tell, it sort of shakes me up. It wakes.
Oh, good.
It does. It's
good.
like it wakes me up. This morning I was looking through some quotes before I came here, and I read Naomi Reams.
Yeah, Naomi
Remens, that's right.
Rachel
Remmons. Rachel Remmons.
Yeah.
I had a quote from her from 2000 and something from Oprah magazine.
Yeah.
And you write about her story.
Yes.
And, and I'm sure that article was because she touched something. There was something that she wrote that resonated with me.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to then do that work around the shadow in their journal, Mark, how would you encourage them to do that? How would they do
Bravely, shamelessly, and without fear. If your journal is the place that you can be off the record, it's the place where you can feel the safest. It really is a refuge for you. So the idea is to tell the whole truth in your journal in a way that you don't do normally in your life. We go through life telling half-truths and conforming and protecting other people and all of those things that are important and worthwhile. But when it comes to touching your own truth, you have to do it without veils, without barriers. And your journal is the place to do it. So say the unsayable. Tell the scary story. Don't repeat the same myth that you just that you've created to pass in the world. go to what you haven't said before, and you know when you're doing it because you feel it in yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a feeling of a little bit of apprehension, trepidation, and that's because you're coming closer to the truth. And the closer you come to the truth in writing, the more you want to go in that direction. It's not like life where we avoid what's scary.
Yeah.
In writing, you want to go toward what's scary because that's what's fresh and real. You know, people. You talk about not being attracted to writers who keep the mask on. Who would be? I mean, especially when you're talking about nonfiction or spiritual writing.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear the company line. They don't want to hear the acceptable thing. They want to hear the unacceptable thing, the paradoxical thing, you know, the thing you wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
So allow yourself to say it. For me, that's been the great joy of writing, is telling secrets.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I had so many secrets that I wanted to reveal. And in life, I'm kind of an introverted person.
Yeah.
But in writing, you want to be as extroverted. You want to be as open as you possibly can be.
That's a really good connection, because I remember reading an article in Essence magazine years ago, and it was about an African American activist. She was a gay woman. Her name was Pat Barker, I think. And a journalist went to her home, and Pat was quite a extrovert, fierce, in-your-face kind of woman. And when the journalist went to her home was ordered, tidy, beautiful, and she was like, hello.
Right.
But she said that Pat was wild in her work and in her writing, and I've noticed there's been a theme around for quite a lot of introverts that the page can allow you to really embody the wholeness of who you are, which is probably why Susan Cain's work's been really quite pivotal in kind of pushing that whole notion of quiet forward. But actually, I think the page, how you describe it, is telling our secrets, is key.
It is. No, it absolutely. And I relate to this Pat Barker.
Yeah, I think that's her name.
Because my life is like a banker's life. I mean, I start writing at the same time. I finish at the same time. I have a very, very orderly life in order to be able to be as wild and kind of unchained as possible in the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that schedule.
Well, discipline is important for writers. Even if you're just writing a journal, it's important to have regularity. Because the psyche then picks up on the fact that you're creating this space on a regular basis. So it begins to reveal itself more easily. That's why momentum, especially if you're writing a book, momentum is so key because it's like the forces of the universe conspire to create what you want to say if you show up. But if you don't show up, they will forget you. They'll say, if you don't have it in you, if you don't care enough to show up on time, we're not going to care enough to give up our goods. So you need to show up. You need to have a regular practice. And if you think of it as a spiritual practice and a psychological practice, then you take it more seriously. This is like inner hygiene that we're doing.
Oh, lovely.
It is. It's creative hygiene. So
that's a great term, creative hygiene.
It really is. It truly is. And if you don't do that, then like I was saying earlier, you start to lose the sensitivity to it. And for me, at least, I feel like my sense of order, my sense of clarity gets broken up. And then it's harder to get back into it. If you know what that's like. If you take 2 days off, it takes you 4 days to get back in. So I say it's just easier to stick with it.
Oh, I totally get that. And my journals are a testimony to that. What a lot of people don't recognise is that there's often a body of work that sits underneath what we kind of put out in the world that supports it. I'm totally with you around the muse is not going to come if you don't turn up regularly. And when I get new writing clients, I always ask them this question: do you have a writing practice? Because I know that if they don't have a writing practice, the only place we're going to be able to start is there. It's very few people that can come to the page without having that practice and put out a book that is a great seller.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And because it's very hard for people to take their own writing seriously, especially if they're not professional writers. You know, why should it matter? Who cares? And it's like saying, who cares if I meditate? Well, who cares is the being in you that wants to wake up. So when you get that the commitment is between you and yourself, and that is really valuable. You take the emphasis off being a writer and put it more on being a human being who's in a process of trying to understand herself or himself. You know, and that's something to be taken seriously. So that's the first thing that I do with writing students is take yourself seriously as a writer. Know that you have something to say. Understand and really believe that your story matters. That's the hardest thing. Many people walk around feeling trivial, uninteresting, unimportant. Why would anyone care what I think? And part of what writing does, journal writing, is saying, I matter enough to show up. I matter enough to write this down. My life is important. My life is interesting. Just claiming that is a big step for a lot of people. You know who helped me with that a lot 25 years ago was Natalie Goldberg.
I went all the way to Taos to one of her workshops.
When I read Writing Down the Bones, I said, oh, it's true. You know, my story matters. It doesn't matter if I'm famous or rich or any of that stuff. It matters that I'm alive. I'm having a human experience, and that human experience deserves to be recorded. And Natalie did a lot for a lot of people.
She did.
In that regard, and it certainly helped me. What she did was confirmed what I had been doing since I was a kid. Said, oh yeah, there's a reason that I have felt compelled to do this.
Yes.
Yeah. This is part of my, this is part of my path.
Yeah.
And it's a path of awakening. It's a path of appreciation, and it's a path of also redeeming experience. You know, we take painful, confusing, difficult experience, we put it down on paper, and we redeem it. We give it we give it reality. We give it substance. When I was a kid, the other reason that I wrote so much is that the people around me were suffering. They were having hard times, and I felt like if I didn't write those stories down, they would be wasted, and all this pain and all this difficulty would go for naught. And I wanted to remember their experiences, and it's the same reason a lot of writers start, is we want to be the witnesses to this bizarre reality that we're born into, and not have it be wasted, not have it just sort of slide into oblivion without anyone taking the time to put it down on paper.
There's so much of what you just said. I've just kind of had a little of a moment. Just the poignancy of how important writing a journal is for us in terms of honouring ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, the Buddha said that you could be you search your entire life looking for someone else, and the person that you're really looking for, searching for that love, is for yourself.
Right. And that you can search the whole world, you'll never find anyone more worthy.
That's it.
Of your love or of your attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really resonate with that. And a few years ago, I clipped an advert for a course. It was at the Royal Festival Hall, and it just had this image of women in wartime kind of doing the harvesting, and underneath it said, every time a woman dies, a library book goes up in flames. And I was like, yes, because if we don't write our stories, you're going to be in that oblivion. You won't exist. And I think this week I put on Twitter, you know, if you don't write your story, your library book is going to go up in flames. And someone wrote me back and said, well, I will get to my story after I get the kids to university, I sort out my job, I clean the house, And we had this great conversation about, I said to her, you know what, could you find the time when you're, after you brushed your teeth, at the doctor's surgery, when you're in the car?
Yeah. What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
You know, also we bank on the future as if we know it's going to exist. That woman may very well raise her kids and then not be around soon after to tell her story. It's important to be in the present, you know, and not give ourselves away, not defer our own existence and our own gratification and our own practice. This is important practice. This is urgent. Life is hard. It's really hard, and it's important. It's precious. So you have to give it the time that it deserves now. Yeah. Surely you can find 15 minutes for yourself a day. That's what I say to people. If you write for 15 minutes a day about your deep experience, it will change you. Yeah. You'll be changed. Also, you'll find you'll want to stop after 15
We know that, don't we?
But give yourself 15 minutes. That's what you could say to a woman like that.
Yeah.
Is surely you're worth 15 minutes a day. Yeah. You don't have to wait 20 years till your kid is out of university before you count. And if you believe that you do, that's something to look at right now. Yeah. Because can you imagine what she's deferring and projecting onto her child? That she's not allowing herself to live. She's not allowing herself to matter. Yeah. That's not good.
I think that really connects. So do you remember last night, yesterday at the evening at the talk at Alternatives, someone said to you about desperate What was
The-
it they said?
Oh, it was great. It was a great. It was the the
Desperate-
courage of desperation, or
Yeah, or the gift of
the
desperation.
the gift of desperation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
yeah, and the future kind of has that, like, sometimes we won't get there. I remember
Yeah.
reading someone in one of the writers' books that I was reading, someone was talking about this person came to their writing workshop with 2 or 3 plastic bags full of snippets of their life story.
Mm.
And when it came to second class, the person hadn't come back and they wondered where they were.
Mm.
So they inquired and they had passed away.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So those stories.
Yeah, are real.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're real.
Yeah.
Part of what writing does is it puts you up against life in a way, in a direct, immediate way that we're not often in our daily lives. Often in our daily, we're just doing things in our daily lives. This puts us up against. It's where the rubber hits the road. You know, it's when you're really looking at what's it like to be me in this moment. What's it like to be alive in this moment? You know, what's going on under the surface in this moment? Those are real. Those are crucial questions to ask. So it puts you up against your existence in a much more urgent and vital, interesting way.
Yeah.
You know, you get, my gosh, this is really life or death.
Yeah.
This is life or death. We're not messing around here.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to scare people, but it's to live with that awareness. When you live with that awareness, especially if you have an awareness of mortality, that's tremendous catalyst for writing.
Yes.
You say, if I don't do it now, I may
Yeah.
never ever do it.
Absolutely.
Not in a kind of cliche way, but in just the simple truth.
Yeah. I really, really get that. I think that's very important what you just said as well, because when I look around me, everywhere I look around me, and I was just saying to my daughter before I came out this morning that I'm also guilty of doing it sometimes.
Mm.
Everyone has their head down on their mobile phones.
Yeah.
And we disconnect from our environment, from the senses,
Yes.
from living in the moment. And I think there's something that writing brings us back into the moment.
It does.
It plugs us in. It's like an electric socket.
It does. It does. It's like meditation in that way.
Yeah.
It is. It's saying, wait, I'm here. Because our mind is always running forward. It's always running into the future or in the past. And what writing does is it focuses us on the now and all that entails.
Yeah.
You know, if right now, there's such a complex reality going on inside you and inside me. There's so much going on. We don't live with awareness of that most of the time. There are a few practices like writing and therapy and meditation that bring us in touch with our inner reality.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it's about. And when you touch that inner reality, it gives you a foundation. You know, it gives you a stronger sense of who you are. And that's why writing strengthens one as a human being. It makes you wiser. It makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Because it connects you to what's going on inside, instead of just scrambling around on the surface of things, which is what we do, you know, a lot of times.
Yeah. So we're learning about your writing practice. Sorry, what time of the days do you write? Are you morning, evening?
I write from 8 to 11.
I'm in your writing time.
No, I'm on tour right now. So
right, so that it sort of relaxes a bit. Okay.
So I write from 8 to 11. I go to the gym. I have my lunch at my desk, and I work till 4 o'clock. That's what I do every day of my life. 5 days a week for the last 30 years. Yeah, that's my life. And it gives me structure. Also, when you work for yourself, you know that it's good to have structure. It's important. But also, writing books is hard. It takes a very long time.
Yeah.
You know, everything goes through at least 3 or 4 revisions. So unless you show up and keep doing it, it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
It's just not going to get done.
Yeah.
And I'm ambitious in the sense that I want to write books. I want to write books. I want to finish books. I want to publish them. I want to reach people. And the only way you can do that is if you have order.
Yeah.
The only way, let me say that, I can do it is if I have order. I know poets who write on the wing, who write on the lam. I can't do that. I'm a prose writer. Most poets, they'll want discipline in their lives.
Yeah. Well, we probably don't see them when they're taking that wing and they're editing it and they're revising it and they're moving things around.
Right.
We often just see the finished product, and that's really, you know, that's the easiest thing to see. So, do you take stuff from your notebooks and your journals? How does that weave into your actual published work?
It depends what I'm writing. If I'm writing a memoir, then yes. I'll look into my journals and my notes. If I'm writing, last couple of books I've been doing were more general about other people's stories, and also ethical wisdom was about. That's the first research book that I've done, so that was an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
That was the most external writing that I've ever done. But normally I pore over my journals, and I take extracts, things that have moved me. And then, I mean, unless you're going to just transcribe the journals, then you want to get to the essence of what you were writing about.
Yeah.
You don't need all of the, there's
The
a lot
stuff?
of the stuff, the moaning, the groaning, the around. So you want to get to what was that one thing I said that rang, that resonated, that was a breakthrough, that was an insight, and then you take that and you transfer it to the to the memoir that you're writing. Yeah.
Can I just connect to that, Mark? I'd like to share a little story with you. I wrote someone's poem down in my journal because it so resonated with me. I thought I could just open up my journal whenever I needed it. And I went back to find the poem, and I noticed I didn't put the name of the poet underneath, which is not like me. And so I Googled the first line of the poem. Nothing came up on Google, and I'm thinking, hold on a minute, I took that out of a book, it must be on Google. Googled it again, nothing. Something said to me, go back and look at the poem. I had written it.
I was going to say, it sounds like maybe you wrote the poem. That's great, though.
I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Because the
intent... You had no recollection at all?
I had no recollection.
Oh, great.
I was in a moment of something. It was actually quite despairing, but there was a lot of wisdom in it. And I thought, oh no, I couldn't have written it that. So I think that a lot of people will go back, and I'm really glad to hear you say how you use your journals with your work, because I think that a lot of people, when they're structured and they recognise how important it is to honour themselves as journalists or writers or keepers of their guardians or historians of their own stories and their own lives, they'll go back to their journals and they'll be able to extract a lot of that gold that is there. It won't be everything.
Right.
But it will be that line, that story, that moment.
Yeah. And if you hadn't done that, that poem would never exist.
It would just have gotten lost.
It would have gotten lost. And isn't that amazing, though? It says so much to me that you didn't even remember writing this thing that was moving to you and that was revelatory to you. So, I mean, that's a testament. That's the reason we write journals.
Yeah.
We also overestimate our memories. We tend to think we're going to remember everything when you don't remember everything.
That's so true.
And you especially don't remember inner experience unless it's big, unless it's major. We forget so much in our day-to-day lives about the subtleties of our experience, the things we noticed in the moment. That kind of stuff can go by the wayside, and then you look back and you say, well, where was I? What was I thinking? What was I doing? And unless you have unless you've taken the time to write it down, you're just not going to know. So it's really important.
It is very important. My daughter, she says to me, Mum, I'm not like you. I'm not going to be reading all these books and writing all these books. But she lives in Dubai. She works as cabin crew for Emirates. And one Christmas, I bought her a travel journal. Well, she's filled it and filled another one and filled another, because she obviously travelled all over the world.
Oh, good.
And it's like we can all come to it in different ways.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's
absolutely. And at different times. Some people you might have given her that journal and 10 years might have passed before she was ready to write it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let something hard, let her boyfriend break up with her or something, she'll go right to her journal.
Yeah. I think it has helped her doing that as well. Definitely. I could stay here talking to you forever, but we're coming to the end of our conversation. You've given us such rich material in terms of particularly around the shadow, writing about difficult, painful emotions, meeting the shadow, making friends, and particularly around paying attention. The paying attention, I think, is what the journal allows us to do. We always have a kind of ending question around being on a desert island.
And what's the question?
So the question about being on a desert island, if you were on a desert island and you were allowed two things, what would you take? A notebook, a blank notebook, or a book to read?
I can have two things?
One.
One thing.
Sorry,
Oh, a blank notebook.
Okay, so tell us why.
Because otherwise, how would I write?
So writing is so important. You would have to have your blank notebook.
Oh, absolutely. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
no question.
Brilliant. So, any final words that you would like to leave our audience with today? Just something for them to take away.
Your life matters. Give yourself the time that you deserve to connect to your experience and to record your experience. Honor your existence. It really is a sacred activity. It's a spiritual activity. You know, when you honor your experience, you bless your life. And that's what writing does. It blesses your life. You know, and you can't transform what you haven't blessed. So until you let it into consciousness, until you put it down, nothing can change.
Yeah.
You can't question your story. So question your story and keep writing. It really matters.
That's wonderful. That felt like a blessing.
Ah, good.
Oh, thank you so much.
Such
It's
a pleasure.
been lovely speaking to you.
Wonderful,
We always do a
Jackee.
little wave to the camera.
Okay.
So we just say bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Mark.
My pleasure.